Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the wonderful Ruby Stokes to talk all about her Netflix series, Lockwood Co. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the audition process, because I've heard you mention that when you first went in and you knew what the role was, that you started doing a little bit of a dive into the books and reading some of that. And so I was just really fascinated and interested in how much of a deep dive it was helpful for you to do on the character and to do on the world around her that potentially was going to be built out through this series, because obviously you're going in and you're auditioning for just one or two scenes at that point, but also you want to get as much information as you can at the same time.
Yeah, I think, well, when I first got it through, it was like a self-tape, and yeah, I got like a draft of the first episode, and obviously I saw that it was like this series of books by Jonathan Stroud, so I obviously looked that up straight away. And at the time they had like a Google Reads, and so I thought, oh, like I might as well, read. Like there was like the first 100 pages. I read that, and I loved it. I loved that it was this story told from the viewpoint of a young adult, a female as well. I think that's especially something that drew me to the role, is that it's it's she's a hero at the helm of this ship sort of thing, but she's also going through that universe experience of being a teenager. She's unapologetically herself. She is opinionated. She is fierce and loyal and loving and vulnerable and all these things that we are as humans. And yeah, so I read the first 100 pages. I obviously looked up the characters, and there were like a couple of wiki fan pages on it, and so I was like in a deep stalk of those. But I didn't read the books until I found out I got the role, because I thought that would be quite a commitment to then find out I didn't get it and just be utterly heartbroken.
I mean, you bring up a great point there as well, that she is a hero at the center of this story, but she's also a very reluctant one who doesn't naturally seek the limelight. There's that conversation with her in Lockwood where he's like, you're the one with the skills and the talent, and I'm the one that actually wants the limelight, and you don't even want it, so it hurts to watch this. And so with that idea of it in mind, how did you kind of find that balance of someone who keeps being thrust into spaces of attention, but who doesn't naturally have a comfort level with that?
Yeah, I think, like, obviously once you take on a character and we were really lucky that we were afforded like a month and a half kind of rehearsal period, but also to delve into the language of the script, the dialect, like to have it. It's so important that we were like well versed, and it was in our everyday, and the physical of the language of the show as well is just so huge and important in telling, like informing the audience of the world. It's incredibly world building. So obviously whilst we were in that period, you just end up like you're obviously looking at the nuances of the character and taking all of that on. But I think the more it was such a long shoot as well, or the longest that I've done, around, I want to say like 9 months we shot for, and then we obviously had the before kind of period. You just end up being, like, obviously the first couple of months you're a bit like figuring out this, like the area, would she do this, how does she move, like would she say something like this, looking at the scripts and stuff. But once you're in it every day, and it was every day, and it was, you kind of impart, you take on that character, and it becomes very natural to walk on, go bish bash bosh, and walk out again. Do you know what I mean? Because you've lived and breathed her for so long, that it becomes, I wouldn't say normal, but I don't say every day. I've said that word like a million times now. It just becomes a part of your everyday, doesn't it? But I think it, that is such an integral part of who Lucy is, the fact that she has so much talent that she isn't aware of, and throughout the show she's learning how to harness it, and is slightly scared of it, but realize it's to use it for the better, and for the good of her friends. And I think it's so much a part of who she is that it was like easy to take on, because that's like number one of who her character is, right?
It is, and with that time as well, with the language of the scripts like you were describing, was that also helpful in finding the sense of humor in her as a character as well? Because there's a lot of kind of very dry wit that develops within this group of the three of them, and her humor, you know, with George is different to her humor with Lockwood, and the kind of like sparring that they have, and it feels like it was very evident probably in the scripts.
Yeah, I think it's all there. Like, you know, the scripts are really brilliant, written by Joe Cornish, Ed Heim, Joy Wilkinson, Cara as well. Like, it's incredibly informative, and obviously you take away a lot, and there's a lot of subtext. But actually, having said that, you know, obviously the wit and the humor's on the page, so you just kind of absorb it and take it in. And that's also who Lucy is. She doesn't take any shit, right? She's just very on the front foot, especially at the beginning when she first meets the boys. She's like, I think she susses them out straight away, and it's just like, what? Sorry, I just swore. I don't know if can I do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't really take any crap from anybody, especially in the beginning. But obviously the latter on through the series, as she forms relationships with these people, you do end up taking on, you know, these things that perhaps you wouldn't have when you were strangers. But no, yes, it's sorry, yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of, actually the dry wit is is part of what keeps them safe. So when we were working with Joe Cornish, he is, you know, kind of like showrunner terms, but he directed 1 and 8 as well. And he said, like, such a huge part of who these people are and how they keep themselves, you know, okay, especially in moments of such great fear, is using humor to combat that. And just, I think they carry such a heavy burden on their shoulders as well, that you would inevitably end up, you know, having that sort of slightly facetious, you know, humor at times.
And I love that like you were just mentioning, that Joe Cornish, as well as being the showrunner, directed episode 1 and 8. So he's really, you know, creating the world, creating all the visual aspects of it, and laying the foundation for the rest of the directors coming in, and then, you know, creating that tail end of where we end up at the end of the season as well. And so what was the benefit of working on this character at the beginning, going through this rehearsal period, having all that of that time back and forth with him, but also having him behind the camera directing that first episode, as you were all kind of figuring out what's the tone, what's the voice of the show, who are these characters together?
Yeah, so helpful, like, it just incredibly important and helpful, because not only is it a challenge to bring someone's vision to the screen, but it's also just Joe, anything we asked, like I asked of him, he always had an answer, or he always had a way of, like, you know, working with myself or the other pardon me, like the other actors, to figure out that the nuances of that character, or like, would they do this here and now? Or obviously there's the brilliant reference of the books, which like, it's like this world is just there. It's parallel to existing to ours, because the way Jonathan's written them is just so full of life. It's so four-dimensional that obviously everyone had that reference, but bringing it to screen is like an entirely, it's massive, like it's a massive project to do. And it's, yeah, like that beginning period where I think finding my feet and finding kind of who this character is, and was incredibly helpful, like important, having Joe there, because he knows these characters inside and out. You know, maybe he'd say like, oh, he doesn't. It's, you know, it obviously is us that brings them to life, but it's he'd always have an answer. But we actually shot 1 first, and then he obviously did 1 and 8, but we shot 1 and 8 in like the first 2 months. So it was a little crazy going from, you know, trying to build Lucy as, I think when I did the auditions, I had the Lucy maybe that was more like in the middle to latter end of the series. You know, she's on the front foot, she's comfortable, she's here, she knows her place. But I think building that Lucy with Joe at the beginning, who's a little bit more timid, who's been through, you know, abhorrent things growing up, that was like a really interesting. But then to jump from that to go to episode 8, where we just, you know, Joe, I think he'd be at times, he'd be like, the stakes are really high, like, because you're still in that world sort of oh, I'm EP1, like, I'm doing EP1 this day, and tomorrow actually I've gone through all of this stuff, and I'm like this, my relationship is like this with said character. And it was just, but Jo knew them inside out, so that was pivotal to understanding.
And in terms of the relationship dynamics, like you were talking about, it's so different by the end of the season, and just the closeness between this group of the three of them, and especially with Lucy and Lockwood, just the kind of like unspoken intimacy that exists between them. And so, especially like you said, having filmed 1 and 8 together, what were the challenges of then trying to build the delicacy of the arc of, how much does she trust him in this moment? How safe does she feel around the two of them? And how is this group dynamic shifting to what I've already created as the end point of this?
Yeah, I think I didn't. Once we started going into kind of like EP2, 3, 4, like the rest of them, you almost like month 1 felt so far away from even like month 3, because you've created and done so much within that time period that I felt further away from that you go, God, what did I even like do? I know, especially when I watched it back, I when they showed it to us for the first time, I definitely was like on the edge of my seat for episode 8, going, oh God, like I just hope that we made the stakes high enough, and it works in that way. And I think it does, actually, because we were all still getting to know each other in the way that the characters were, obviously, but they're all kind of on the edge in episode 8, and they don't know what's coming, and they're all walking into unknown territory. And actually, so I think it benefited. It like really helped build that story. But yeah, all those intimate scenes and kind of how intimate the relationships get. It's hard to say, because it like that would have obviously at the time, had we filmed 8 at the end, I would have thought back in a moment and gone, right, what we did then informs now. Pardon me, I've got a frog in my throat. So obviously, like, what we did then informs now, Lucy's feeling like this, and right, I'm going to do it like this because when we did that in EP6, and so on and so on. But I think it all ended up, it worked out. I would like to sit here and say, I knew exactly what those intimate moments would hold, and I knew exactly how we play it. But I think that's kind of the beauty of the job, right? Is that you bounce off of the person opposite you, and you don't know what they're going to bring on their day. And you might think that you're going to bring something different, but you end up bringing this because of the environment and how you're bouncing off each other, and you're taking on this note, and it all ends up being different. And I think it ended up working out for the better.
You also were touching upon before her childhood, her upbringing, and we get to kind of see some of the facets of that at the beginning of the series, and her relationship with her mother, where her mother really just needs her to work, and it's less about having this actual relationship dynamic between the two of them. And Lucy saying to her, I don't think you were ever capable of loving me, was so telling, and the fact that she's the one to choose to leave the family home off the back of that. And so within that, what was the importance that you found on these relationship dynamics that are building for her the rest of the season, with just the weight of what it means for her to consider them to be family at a certain point, given that that's something that she never really felt like she had growing up?
So do you mean like, what was the weight of, sorry, Mara?
Yeah, like what was kind of like the weight of the relationship dynamics that develop that's almost more intense and intrinsic with Lockwood and with George, and for her to be able to consider them family, given that she never felt like she had family.
Yeah, I think she places, once she lets those people in and she kind of takes down that wall a little bit, she places a lot of value on the relationships that she has with these people, because they're the only people in her life who have ever shown her any sort of, bar like her friend who she talks about back home, Nori, who have ever shown her any sort of love and understanding and compassion and encouragement as well, but like good encouragement, supportive encouragement. And she it was important that when I think we made those earlier scenes, that about the world building of like her childhood and why she is how she is now. It was incredibly important that she goes through this realization, this understanding, but therefore, has this wall up, and she places, in turn places more value on those moments with Lockwood and George and those relationship dynamics.
And in preparation for this role as well, you were mentioning the rehearsal period, and I know there was also a lot of stunt training and choreographing of certain scenes for the show as well. And even just beyond the choreography and the moves that helped you figure out throughout the show, how did that also help you to really understand her as a character and going through a lot of that training and figuring out aspects of, okay, this is how she as a character is going to hold a sword, this is how she's going to move in this particular scene?
Yeah, I think so. So Jennifer White, who was the movement choreographer, we worked quite intensely with her, and also the stunt team at the beginning, headed by Dave Foreman. And I remember when we first kind of did a session together, she was asking like, what do you want from Lucy, and how are we gonna go from, Lucy she's clearly got the talent, right? And but she doesn't, when she comes to Lockwood & Co, it's different, right? They're like more brushed up, they're more polished, but we have to give Lucy this edge of roughness, but she's got this raw talent. But then as the series goes on, like build her talent. So we went in kind of learning it all, learning the movement and parries with Philip d'Orleans, who was the sword master, and just learning the basics of how to do everything, then taking it all the way, and this is what they end up like, and then pairing it back and being able to work throughout the series of like the building blocks of how they end up getting to where they are. Actually, the first time I worked with Jen, like she was like, oh, like, you're very fluid and dynamic in your movement, but actually I don't think that's what Lucy is. And that was a really interesting and fun challenge to take on, breaking down my own sort of the way that I move throughout, even the way that I walk, or the way that, perhaps Lucy walks more with her chest forward, and breaking down those sorts of things, and spending like a couple of hours just walking around a room, or like, it sounds so like almost like so kind of, oh, those are the small things, but those small things inform how you do the larger things, right? And if you have those down, then I think you're good to go, and you're good to like plop on the bit that you bring to the character.
And you're also doing a myriad of scenes throughout the show in which there are these interactions with ghosts. And so there's a lot of VFX throughout the series. And it sounds like there were kind of a myriad of different ways in which those would be filmed, where sometimes it was, getting to look at an iPad mock-up of this is what you're going to be up against in this scene. And that sometimes there would be some sort of like mannequin being puppeted within a scene. And so what were the different ways in which those tools really helped you in terms of knowing how to go in and how to play certain scenes with the visual aspects that you would be given, or understanding of what it was going to look like eventually?
Yeah, I think so sometimes they would show us a mock-up of like what the character was going to look like, or it would be an incredibly early sketch. That was really helpful to know just where to place like the level of fear or kind of intimidation that this ghost or character holds, but sometimes we wouldn't have that. And I remember when we did episode 8, there's a part where Ali, who plays George, we were like lying on the floor and we're like looking up at this really terrifying ghost, but at the time like there wasn't a mock-up, and it was just like a massive camera crane with like red strobe lights attached to it, and we were just like, so what does this thing look like? And Joe had like this mic at the time, and he was just like, scary, it's really scary, it's it's just gonna look scary. And okay, what's the scariest thing that I can think of? But you tell yourself, I'm going to think this, but it just, once you get in the moment, it all ends up going out of your head, right? But yeah, those mock-ups are really helpful, but sometimes you can't help but like finish a scene where you're chasing around like this LED like mannequin, or like an orb, like a silver orb, and you're chasing it around and you're really in the moment, and then you come out of it in just that split second of finishing the scene and someone's like, cut, you go, what am I doing? Like, what are we doing right now? This is this is crazy. Like there's Mikey, who's the puppeteer who puppeteered the ghost. He's like really bloody brilliant, and he was in this skin tight green suit, and you just think, what, like, this is so funny. Like, what are we doing right now? But you only think that afterwards, because you get lost in the moment. You get lost in the sort of fighting the silver orb.
I also love the scene that Ali's talked about filming with the monks, where there were a whole slew of actors, and that he had this moment where he kind of forgot that he was in a scene because it felt very real. And so for you, what were some of those external aspects, whether it was what some of the other cast were doing or production design elements or costume elements, that really helped you to immerse in character or a particular scene?
We had a wind machine. So I remember the first couple of days, it was, well, we're filming some of these eps in some of these scenes in Sheen Road and Ep 1, and it was just a leaf blower, and I had absolutely no idea that it was going to be there. And it just got like and leaf blower, and it just got like blasted into my face. But it really helps create that atmosphere of what this ghost is and what it does to the environment as well. And you are in the headspace of, like, you know, just kind of seeing this ghost and fighting it. And we did, like, at 4 they used like 8-foot wind machines. It was, you know, it sounds so funny when you talk about it, but it really helps create the environment and the illusion of that, what that ghost is there and what it feels like and what it does to you. And so therefore, like, how are you holding yourself? Are you standing strong? Are you standing weak? And especially when we did that scene in Ep 3, when we filmed that, they had, like Ali says, like they had these dancers who were walking in such a way and doing hand movements that it really created an atmosphere. And Will McGregor, who was the director of Eps 2, 3, and 4, he played this like really ominous, spooky music, and it does sort of like put you in a trance, and it takes you to a place and brings this other element to your performance.
I love that. And you were talking a little bit earlier as well about just the difference in the dynamic that she has with her skills and with her abilities. And it goes from something that she has had since she was a child. You know, we hear her mom talking about how even as a baby, she just always had this connectivity. And, you know, we get to see her having an actual conversation with a ghost for the very first time. So even just learning and discovering new things about her skills and her abilities that go even beyond what she thought she had. And so as you kind of worked with her as a character, what was that difference in terms of the relationship that she has with this ability that you really wanted to have evolve, or the changes that you wanted to create towards the end versus where we meet her at the beginning, where it's, you know, it's kind of this burden and then it's something that she really learns to embrace about herself?
Yeah, the beginning, I think it was important to show that Lucy she is a little bit a cut above other, like, everybody has such talent, like in the way that they can listen and hear and see ghosts, but she's just that slight cut above, that she's more in tune with it. So I think I wanted to show that, but also show that she was totally vulnerable to it. She's totally unaware that she has this. And I guess that's what makes her slightly endearing to other people, and also to the boys when she goes and sees them. It's like, this character has absolutely no idea how talented and powerful this talent is that she's got. And like that first time she realizes it, I think it was important to show that is it me? Like, as in Lucy going, is it me? Am I losing it? Like, what's happening here? Because nobody knows this is possible bar the person that's done it before her, right? And it's like, she, again, because she doesn't believe wholly in herself, she questions her own mental sort of state of mind, right? That, God, is this, like, am I losing it? And when she plucks up the courage to kind of go over and talk to the skull and realize what she has, I actually think it's, for her in that moment, it was important to show that it's not a burden, and actually, like, it totally brings her out of her shell and gives her the confidence for the first time to go to these boys like, look what I can do. You know, you can do all of this, but look, I've actually, oh my God, like this has given me so much confidence to bring to the table, that I have so much to bring. And then I think it is like, it was then showing that it becomes a burden, because she doesn't want to be the one in the limelight, you know, like we spoke about. She doesn't want to be that person, and she almost wishes this thing would go away, but she realizes that it brings just a level to this agency that nobody else has. And just at the end, she harnesses that power for good. And I think that's, you know, I think about everybody, even though we're not all psychic ghost hunters, I think everybody goes through that sort of questioning yourself phase, to then realizing, actually, you know, this thing or whatever that I can bring to the table holds value. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, you were mentioning before how this is the longest that you've spent on a particular project and with a particular character. And so in reflection, what's been the difference of the experience for you in getting to spend 9 months filming, getting to have all that preparation, and really probably spending an entire year very immersed in the world of who this character is and production space?
I loved it, Mara. Like, I just absolutely loved it. You know, being afforded the opportunity to do stunts was just insane. Like, you know, Dave was incredibly encouraging, and just, I was like, oh, but can I get up there and do this? And can I get on the harness? Like, I'd really love to know what that feels like and see how far I can push myself as well. Like, that was another thing, just seeing how far, you know, within reason, like how far you can push yourself. The skills I learned, you know, I got to do underwater diving, like deep dive training for scenes that I did, kind of like, I think there's some in Ep 2, maybe a bit in Ep 3. Oh God, no, it's Ep 2, it's Ep 2. I was thinking like when she thinks back to it, where she's opposite Annabelle Ward, the ghost, and it just, she's realizing what's going on, and that was just like, yes, like they were like, we can, you know, Ellie Keeley, who was my stunt double, was just so hands-on and always there and always really supportive of me. And like, I'd come to her with, how do I do this, or can you show me, or can you do it, and then maybe I'll go and do it. And like that sort of like team sort of community sort of spirit, just like the amount that I got to do and learn was just so cool. And I love that. And I think that's what's, you know, I said it earlier, that's the cool thing about this job, is that you get to learn and take on so much. But not only that, what was huge about spending like this time on Lockwood was just the people you meet, right? Like, I love people, I love chatting to people, talking to people, maybe almost at a detriment, right? Because I talk a bit too much sometimes, but it's like, you know, I love, everybody is so, it takes an army to make, you know, anything, to put anything to screen. And everybody that I met was just, oh, so cool. And like all the crew, you know, I got to know the crew in a way that I hadn't been afforded to before, because I hadn't spent enough time on a set to, you know, get to know people in that way. And I loved that, and I made really brilliant friends over this job, and got to do so much. It was brilliant, and brought a lot of challenges as well that I learned to kind of overcome, and how to pace myself. I didn't even realize, you know, I was like, wow, that's a huge thing, learning to pace and have stamina, right? When the more you get to the end, what you need to do for yourself in order to do the job. Yeah, it was really, really good fun, long form job. But that's not to say I do like short form as well. I like everything.
I love that so much, and that it was such a fantastic experience for you, and it's such a great first season of the show. So congratulations on all of the amazing reception to it, and thank you so much, Ruby.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mara. It's been really good fun.